Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week we are back on our book club format here. This time we're reading the book Jacked, the Outlaw Story of Grand Theft Auto by David Kushner. Fun fact about this, the same author that wrote this book is the author that wrote Masters of Doom, which is another great book that we've covered on this show. Highly recommend you check out both of these books because I think he does a really great job of telling these stories. So yeah,
we love Kushner book here.
We are big fans of David Kushner. I always want to say Tony Kushner because that's the playwright that wrote Angels in America and a couple other things. I always want to say Tony Kushner, but it's David Kushner. Both very good storytellers. Different people. Unclear if they're related or not. Don't know.
Maybe related.
They might be. Maybe. They're both good storytellers. Maybe they grew up in a family of storytellers.
I would love that if they were.
I don't know.
Beautiful.
So we're talking Grand Theft Auto today, but through the lens of talking about this book, I do want to buy the book, read the book, because we are not going to do it justice here. We're just here to discuss the book and talk about Grand Theft Auto and sort of throw our own flavor in here. I think it's funny that we've never covered the GTA as a series before on this show.
Yeah, it's weird.
We talked about Chinatown Wars a couple of weeks back because that was the game of the month in one of the subreddits that I visit, but we haven't dove into Grand Theft Auto as its own series. We've talked about it, of course, in how it inspired a lot of other things. And we've talked about Grand Theft Auto 3 at length because I think that game is, if I had to pick one, I think it's the most important game released in the 21st century. That's what I think.
Even more so than Doom? Well, that was technically the 20th century, right?
Yes.
I guess that's how you're getting around that, isn't it?
Exactly. Really, I think there is a case to be made. Yeah. There is a case to be made that this is the most important video game in terms of how it affected modern video games. You can always argue, well, Pong's the most important video game because it was the first one. Without that, you would never have any other video. Sure. But I think Grand Theft Auto 3 is the most important game.
I would agree with that.
Because when it came out, there's a seismic shift that happened at the time. There's pre Grand Theft Auto 3, and then after that game came out, every game was different again, right? Open world became this popular concept, and Grand Theft Auto 3 didn't invent the open world, but it made it work in a way that other games could look at and go, oh, we can do that too. I think it pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable content in games. Because we talk about Jack Thompson in the 90s, but Grand Theft Auto was this major proof point of what was acceptable. Are games for children anymore, or is this an art form that extends beyond what is appropriate for kids, and is this for adults now? Basically, it's not for kids. Yeah. So there's I think Rockstar also sort of led the charge on this, right? Not just with Grand Theft Auto, but we also had games like Manhunt. You had Bully, or the ever controversial Rockstar Presents Table Tennis. Very controversial. I know.
Can we even discuss table tennis?
I think the table tennis is something
podcast.
Right. Tyler. We're going to have to come back to that one later when attitudes around video games have changed further, because table tennis is just it's a little bit too far. No, but in all seriousness, I do remember when table tennis came out, because it was supposedly, or probably is actually true, running on the same engine as Grand Theft Auto 4, and Grand Theft Auto 4 wasn't out yet. So it was people were thinking this was going to be some sort of weird Grand Theft Auto 4 preview, and it wasn't. It was just table tennis. That's all. That's all. Table tennis. Just table tennis. Just a very nicely well done table tennis game. But anyway, back to the book here. We're going to open here on the prologue that centers around Sam Hauser, and there's a few characters in this book that are going to be pretty important. Sam Hauser is probably the most important, alongside his brother Dan Hauser. But at the start of the book, it's Sam Hauser having to meet with the U.S. Congress to talk about the content of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, so there was Grand Theft Auto 3 in 2001, Vice City was 2002, and then San Andreas was in 2004. And San Andreas had some extra controversy around it because of what is known in the industry as the hot coffee scandal of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Basically, the TLDR on that is there was a mini game sort of buried in the code of San Andreas. It was pretty clearly something they had worked on, but then decided for whatever reason, probably because it was too explicit. We don't need to get into the details of it, but they decided yeah, you know what? We're we're not going to do this. We're just going to cut this out. So it's very unfinished, but the code and some of the assets still remained in the game. And if you had like a Game Shark or mods on PC were a really easy way to do this, you could unlock this content. And it sparked kind of a big controversy around like, well, this is included with the game, even if it's not supposed to be accessible. So does that mean that this game is now, inappropriate for kids? And it ended up shaking out that like those copies of San Andreas that had this mini game in it, even hidden within it, ended up being like relabeled adults only, and then they like put out an updated version that didn't have any of those assets, and they could keep their M rating. But anyway, Sam is getting ready to talk to the United States Congress about this, so sort of sets up like these dramatic stakes for Sam Hauser, and I think it's a cool way to open the book. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this was exciting. It's a good little tease, of where we're gonna go. It hooks you in, and then we get into the chapter 1 and like the origin story of everything.
Yeah,
I love the way David Kushner does these books.
me too.
I don't know how he does it still. I've talked about it in Masters of Doom. I have no idea how he takes all these hundreds and thousands of interviews and like puts them together into a cohesive story, but he does an amazing job with it, and it's great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I would
into it.
I would love to see like what the process is there of like, okay, I have all of these things. I have kind of an idea of what this story is. You sort of have to outline it. And like, I feel like you can't sit down and just like start writing words until you know the overall structure of the story that you're going to tell. And I imagine that's kind of fun for like a journalist in this way of like, okay, here are all the interviews. How do I tie all of these things together and form a cohesive story out of it and write a book? And Masters of Doom is one of those as well. He does the exact same thing in Masters of Doom. And it's a great book as well. So highly recommend buying both of these books.
Yeah, we even like in chapter 2, I think we get to meet our antagonist, if you will, too, which is like their origin story, which is kind of cool because he's giving you all sides of it, which is neat.
Yeah.
So everyone has like kind of a descriptive personality to them, and it's not just like this is the bad guy, which
right.
is what I liked.
Right. And these are real humans. So it's hard to have like a cartoonish, like mustache twirling bad guy when these are all humans who contain multitudes. Even Jack Thompson, I'm sure, is not an actual terrible person. I don't know. I've never met him.
Does he have a mustache? Does he twirl it though?
Ooh.
Do we know that?
Unclear. Unclear if he actually does that. So.
It's the real hard-hitting journalistic questions you find on Codex History of Video Games.
Yeah. Does Jack Thompson have a mustache to twirl?
Have they ever tied someone to train tracks? We'll never know. We'll never know.
So yeah, that's the prologue. Is like let's talk in front of Congress about this video game that I made and how things are potentially being blown out of proportion, but maybe not. And that's why we're here, is to discuss, if this is worth discussing about. So moving into chapter 1, we're talking about the early days of Sam and Dan Hauser. This is where Tony. See, I keep doing it. Tony Kushner, David Kushner, he is trying to build up these characters. It's like, here's sort of their origin. Here's how they grew up. Here are the things that they're into. So Sam and Dan Hauser are brothers that live in the UK. I like how this chapter starts on like a description of a scene from Get Carter, which is apparently a very popular British crime film that I've never seen. But it came out the same year that Sam Hauser was born, and Dan is a couple of years younger than Sam. So, but this movie, they also remade it in 2000. So I want to watch these movies because it seems like there's maybe some insight.
It's a Michael Caine movie, right?
Yeah. Where it's got like a very famous like getaway driving scene. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I probably should watch it. But the framing is important to the character of Sam Hauser, because when he's asked what he wants to be when he grows up, he replies, bank robber, which is not really a career path. Certainly not one that parents want to encourage.
Technically it is. It's just, it's really hard to get into and be successful at, I would say.
Yeah, very risky, it's
high risk, high reward career choice.
That's right. Yeah, and it's probably harder and gets harder and harder as time goes on to be a successful bank robber in the traditional sense of like, this is a stick up, which is how bank robbers talk. They say this is a stick up, and
they still do.
Right, they still do to this day. And then they get their money is thrown into big sacks with dollar bills signs written on them, of course. And that's how they make their exit, is with those. And
there's a high-speed chase that ends in a big car pile up, just like the Blues Brothers every time.
That's right. Yep. So Sam Hauser loved these kinds of movies, like Get Carter, right from the start. You know that scene in Goodfellas, or at the start of Goodfellas, when Ray Liotta's character talks about like all his life he wanted to be a gangster. It's like,
Oh
oh, my
yeah.
whole life I wanted to be a gangster. That's kind of what Sam Hauser is. He's like, my whole life I wanted to be a gangster, or I wanted to be a bank robber, or like these non-traditional career paths, I should say. Non-traditional, legally dubious career paths.
Mm-hmm. We don't condone that.
No, we don't. And to his credit, he did not actually pursue any of these career paths.
No.
So yeah, but what Sam and his brother Dan do love that can lead them to a lucrative career path is video games. And games in the 1980s are almost all family friendly. They were kind of seen as children's toys, and this was going to take a long time for games to break out of that stigma, because they were very simplistic. They were games meant for children. Sometimes adults would get into them. Like a lot of adults loved Pac-Man or Space Invaders and stuff like that. But you wouldn't say that those games were for adults, right? They were kids. They were probably made for kids that adults sort of enjoyed as well. But yeah, it was going to take a long time to break that stigma. This is something that Sam and Dan Hauser would help to break that stigma. So Dan's 2 years younger than Sam, but he would eventually get physically larger than him. So of course they were physically fighting all the time, which is, as I understand it, a normal thing for brothers. What?
Total normal brother stuff.
Total normal brother stuff. I didn't really fight my brother growing up. We didn't get into physical altercations very often, at least not that I remember. So maybe he beat me up real good and I just don't remember.
You
But
just blacked that part out of your mind.
yeah, he's 3.5 years younger than me. So I don't know. Maybe he beat me up. I don't know. But I never really fought him. So I'm not familiar with this dynamic very much. But Sam.
You could now as an adult.
That's true. I could. He probably could beat me up now because he's taller than me. He's a little bit more physically intimidating than me. Not that he's very physically intimidating. Ben, if you're listening to this, I don't know who would win in a fight between us, to be honest. I don't know.
Ben, this Tyler just called you out. I'm going to start.
But Sam was way into video games, and Dan was a little bit more into reading and like writing good stories. And I think when this book came out in 2012, so this book is pretty old by now. It's 13 years old at this point. So it doesn't cover some of the later things. Grand Theft Auto 5's not in there. Red Dead 2's not in there. Those kinds of things. So this would have been right around the time LA Noire came out, which was one of Rockstar's first like really heavily story-driven games. The first Red Dead was, and all of the Grand Theft Autos had storylines, and they got progressively better and better storylines, especially I would say Grand Theft Auto 4 pushed things forward in that regard as well. But Dan is probably the one who is more making that stuff happen, at least going off of what we've read in this book so far. That's my prediction here. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. I just like the setup of like this, like the gameplay guy, which is Sam, and then the storytelling guy, which is his brother Dan. I think that's a cool dichotomy. I'm sure the actual storyline here is a little bit of a mix of both or whatever. But Rockstar would become very famous for telling good stories in video games a couple of decades later, after where we are in the 1980s. So that's where we're at. We're in the 1980s right now, and the Hausers were born in the early 70s, so they're coming of age teenagers in the 80s. So they had every popular video game set up in the UK at the time. Shout out to their parents, because that could not have been cheap. But in the UK, this was heavily skewed towards home computers and less towards home consoles. So they had the ZX Spectrum, or the ZX Spectrum, if you're cool.
ZX Spectrum.
Yep, that was pretty big at the time. They played a lot of games on them. Again, Sam was more into it than Dan, but Sam always got Dan to play too. This chapter is a setup for Sam's character. A bit more as well. He's this like punk iconoclast who has a distaste for authority and a penchant for pushing the envelope of what's acceptable. So, they go to like an all boys school, or I don't know if it's an all boys school, but they go to like a private school in the UK where they have to wear a uniform. And Sam's always finding ways to personalize his uniform and like make it a little bit punk. And like he's wearing Doc Martens and stuff like that. So like he's very punk rock, right?
Is there like an early nod to Bully in there? That's what I
potentially, yeah. That's a game I haven't played that we should probably talk about on this podcast.
Yeah, never played Bully before. It's a big miss on our collective knowledge here.
Yeah, I remember the controversy at the time because it was like, you get to actually play a schoolyard bully, and I assume that the game's themes are, yes, you get to play a schoolyard bully and you have some fun doing those things, but probably by the end of the game, we have been shown that being a schoolyard bully is not what you want to be, but I don't really know, I guess.
Yeah.
But they were both really into music at the time, specifically like the music that was on the label Def Jam Recordings, which was a record label that got famous for a lot of New York rap in the 80s. So like the Beastie Boys and stuff like that. They speak very highly of Rick Rubin, who is a famous music producer of a lot of different acts that are and still are successful to this day. Rick Rubin, famous music producer. Basically, everything he touched turned to gold, was really good. Famously, doesn't play an instrument, doesn't know how to music. He just knows how to get other people to make good music, which is kind of wild to me.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, anyway, that's just a little side tangent on Rick Rubin. I think that's the guy. I always get Rick Rubin and Jerry Finn confused.
Well, Rick Rubin is the one in the Jay-Z music video, What Walks Around with Him, right?
Maybe.
I mean, that's very open. I just realized how open-ended that was. But there's a music video where I'm pretty sure it might have been 99 Problems, where Rick Rubin is like in that music video with him. So,
okay.
And that's a hit.
Hey,
that was a huge hit. So
Rick Rubin was the Midas touch of music in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So
true.
Yeah. That the chapter here ends with Sam kind of scoring himself a job in the record industry. His dad takes him to New York when he was 18, and he kind of meets with some executives for BMG. His dad is just like has all these connections. Like this is very much an example of like when your parents know people, you get inroads into industries.
You know, I'm glad that you said it because it definitely was something that was like underneath all of this that was never really said out loud, I feel like, but it was just kind of implied that the Hauser brothers grew up well.
Yeah.
How
they had every video game.
Video game system. They had these connections. They went to a private school. They had like all this kind of stuff going for them. So it's like, okay, they grew up well, which I think is something. We're not making a commentary on that, but that's just what happened. So
yeah, I mean, and I don't mean this as to like take away from like, yeah, well, anybody who had that setup could have done what they did. Like, no, they went on to do great things, and the reason they were able to do that is because they had a good foundation underneath them to do that. That doesn't take away from their talent. I know we like to have this like myth that like talent is the only thing that matters. It's not, but it is still required. So I don't mean to take away from their talent, but also I want to acknowledge that like these guys had some opportunities that not everybody else would have had.
With that said, though, Sam Hauser, if you're listening to this, Tyler wants to physically fight you.
That's true.
Much like his brother.
And I don't know who would win that fight either because I don't actually know what Sam Hauser looks like.
I think he's an older guy. You might have a.
You think so? All right. I'm going to Google Sam Hauser.
We should do this as a new segment. Every single history episode. Would Tyler win in a fight physically against the person we're talking
He's got a pretty gnarly beard. I feel like you could grab onto that in a fight. Just kidding. This is all. I'm not. I do not mean to suggest that I actually am trying to get violent with Sam Hauser. I just think it's funny to.
Oh my God.
Okay, so this is new Codex lore dropping. Tyler and Sam Hauser, enemies.
I
nemesis.
thought you were gonna say he's got like a gnarly beard, so it's intimidating. I was not ready for you to say I'm gonna grab onto it.
Like, if we're fighting, we're scrapping. I mean, it depends. Are we talking? Is this like fight for life, or is this a fight for?
I like to think it's like you're in under an overpass in a city, and it's like you're meeting up like very Anchorman style.
Oh, sure. And like I got my crew, he's got his crew.
Yeah,
so there's a trident.
Yeah. Someone's got a
killed
grenade.
A guy.
It's gonna be like that. It's a lot like the first Anchorman. That's what it's gonna be like. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, man. Anyway, that's chapter 1.
That blindsided me. I was not ready for that, Tyler. That was wonderful. What a great episode so far. What a gift you've given everyone today.
Wow. We're on it today.
So there's people being like, go back to the story.
That's the first chapter of this book. Chapter 2, just back to our themes around media and pushing boundaries. Chapter 2 opens with, oh man, here we go. This is kind of a violent episode. Chapter 2 opens with lines from the song, from Ice-T's song Cop Killer. It's actually not Ice-T's song. It's Ice-T's band Body Count. Did the song Cop Killer, which for obvious reasons, I don't need to explain why that song is controversial. But it is something that happened around the same time as these like early video game things that like Jack Thompson was trying to do in those days. I think it's funny that Ice-T got famous for Cop Killer because now he plays a cop on TV in Law and Order.
That's True.
Uh,
It's so weird when
I
you think
know.
about
And his
it.
character's great because he's always asking questions. Like he's because Law and Order always has like something weird happening where it's like some weird like a subculture that is like not really well known and they're probably butchering when they talk about it on TV. But he's like, so you're telling me this thing I don't understand? And then they go, yeah, that's how it works. And he's always the one who like has to have everything explained to him for us, for the audience. That's so we know what's going on.
So we're Ice-T
We are
in
Ice-T. Ice-T is in a lot of ways the stand-in for the audience in Law and Order
the
episodes.
Law and Order SVU universe. That's
Yeah,
good.
the SV universe. Just Law and Order. Is he SVU or is he just Law and Order?
No, he's an SVU.
He's SVU. Okay.
Yeah, I know this because my wife religiously watches Law and Order SVU.
Okay.
She's seen so many episodes. I think she could like describe the plot as each one starts to me.
Oh yeah, they're pretty.
It's impressive.
Is it because she has seen them all, or because she just knows the formula?
She's seen them all.
Okay,
And she knows the formula.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great television to turn on and just do something else too. It really is.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
So this time period, Jack Thompson as absolute peak. It's the early 90s. He's in full-on crusade mode against this kind of media that he finds objectionable and inappropriate for kids. So this chapter is, like you were saying earlier, this is the setup for our antagonist of Jack Thompson. And we've covered video game controversies in some earlier episodes, but suffice to say, this guy's kind of a villain to the entire game industry, especially in the early 90s. Later on, he would kind of fall off and be less intimidating, but at this point, he was actually kind of scary. He was always inciting some sort of moral panic or another about whatever media was popular at the time. He's a lawyer. He's super religious. So to set this character up, this chapter goes into detail about how he spoke out against Cop Killer. And he was very successful in that. Time Warner, which was the label that had Ice-T in his band Body Count, they dropped him after this controversy like just kept piling up. Like it was enough bad press that they were like, sorry, we can't do this anymore. Later, gamers are going to laugh at Jack Thompson and his inability to get video games censored in a similar fashion. But it is important to note that this guy was actually pretty successful at what he was trying to do in the earlier days. And it wasn't just video games that he was going after. He was successfully stopping this kind of thing in other media as well. So, yeah. Meanwhile, our boy Sam is coming up in the entertainment world. He's got a good feel on the pulse of what's hot and what's going to be hot in pop culture. In 1992, he suggested using the nascent internet to promote Annie Lennox's new album, Diva. They just made a website for it. That's what using the internet in 1992 to promote something means. It means make a website.
A little JavaScript, a little HTML.
Well, probably not even JavaScript. Probably just HTML.
Oh, yeah. The little HTML, maybe some CSS. Did they have CSS back then? I don't know.
They did not. It was just HTML.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, in 1992, websites basically didn't exist. Just having a website was like enough to work. And it did. It worked for Annie Lennox, who is famous for what?
Oh, go ahead. So we could have a whole episode about how old the internet looked. Like, because I have deep memories of like being on my Gateway 2000 computer in the basement in Eagle River, Alaska, and being like, "This is the internet." You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
this is what it looks like.
You're like, this is it, huh? Okay, well, yeah, this is
my Encyclopedia Britannica CD. You know, that kind of thing.
Encarta 97.
It was Encarta, not Encyclopedia Britannica. There you go. You know.
But the internet was like kind of just for nerds at the time. So using it to promote something like this, I think for Annie Lennox, it made total sense because she's got kind of this like new wave. She is one half of the synth pop duo, the Eurythmics, made famous "Sweet Dreams." You know that song, "Sweet Dreams." We don't want to get copyright struck, but anyway,
don't want to get struck down, so that's good. Be careful.
She was instrumental in that song, and then she had her solo album. Anyway, this is all unimportant to the actual story that we're telling. The point of that
on fire today.
The point of that story is really just this guy has his finger on the pulse of what's cool in pop culture, and he knew how to use new technology to do stuff. He was pretty interested in CD-ROM technology, which was starting to become viable for distributing content beyond just music. CDs obviously had been a thing for a decade at this point. But Sega was about to release the Sega CD. It was pretty clear that this was a new medium for interactive media, like video games or things like that. Video games were starting to get bigger, of course. This was the time period where Mortal Kombat came out. Mortal Kombat was very interesting to Sam because he was always eager to push boundaries and see what was acceptable. Mortal Kombat was doing that. It had its own set of government controversies. Specifically, Joe Lieberman was crusading against games in the U.S. Congress and pointed to Mortal Kombat. This is all stuff we've talked about in previous episodes before.
Yeah.
But even Nintendo at this point in time, like, they didn't get it. Howard Lincoln is basically quoted as saying that video games are for kids and that they should never have objectionable content. Like, it's like, I don't believe that video games are not for kids. Maybe adults play them, but we shouldn't make them for adults. These are children's toys. And that's Howard Lincoln, the head of Nintendo. And they still kind of hold on to that a little bit today. But it's a little bit looser for them. So this chapter is all about setting up the battleground for video games in the early 90s. These were the first like widespread moral panics that parents were starting to get up in arms over. Today, games are clearly a wide-ranging medium with something for everybody. I think they're closer to something like movies or music. You never hear somebody who just says like, I don't really listen to music, right? It's like, music's not for me. It's like, no, it's always, it's sort of assumed everybody listens to music. It's just, what kind of music do you listen to? Same for movies. It's assumed that everybody watches movies. It's like, but what kind of movies do you like? And video games are not there yet at this point in time. But I think in modern times today, we're getting closer to that point where it's like everybody plays games. It's just like, what kinds of games do you like? But at this point in time, they were still something for kids, like as toys. Like, this is almost, imagine if Mattel put out like, this is another weird thing, but if Mattel put out like serial killer Barbie, right? You'd be like, what the heck? What is this? Like, this is for kids. Like, what are you doing here? Like, that's how people saw video games in the 90s. And if you put out a game like Mortal Kombat, it's basically the equivalent of putting out like serial killer Barbie, right? So you can understand why folks would take objection to this. What?
That's a great metaphor. I think serial killer Barbie, it works for this.
Thanks. It's like Dexter.
Yeah.
Wow, we could go down a rabbit hole here. But yeah, so that's the world that Sam and Dan Houser started to build their gaming empire in. It was still many years away from becoming a reality, but we're setting up sort of the time period, what the stakes are, what these two are going to be interested in, and what the lay of the land was like at the time where they decided that they wanted to start making video games. So yeah, that's the first two chapters.
I think there was something also in that chapter too that they didn't understand why for example, I think they mentioned in this that the bloody version that's on Sega Genesis of Mortal Kombat sold more than the cleaner Nintendo version.
That's true.
So they didn't understand that people wanted that.
Right.
Also, people wanted it to be more adult and violent. So, but yeah, that's just something I thought of while you were talking about it there. But yeah, chapter 3 opens on Dave Jones of Dundee, Scotland. Now, Kushner does his classic storytelling device of explaining Jones's childhood is running away from gangs of others nerds that he's made mad because he beat their high scores on Galaga and their territory is how he would describe it.
Their turf.
I don't know how much of it's true, but it does that kind of fun 80s movie opening, it feels right,
Yeah.
So this chapter really is here to set the scene of what Dave Jones will become. So Jones was lucky in that he lived in Dundee, Scotland, which was a once prosperous factory town that was kind of on a downward slide, but things changed relatively quickly for them because the Timex plant in town started to produce a new product. That was the Sinclair ZX81 and the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. So this meant that Jones's school was the first school of the high schools in essentially Scotland to offer computer classes because they were in the city where they built the computers.
That's cool.
And this is something that he excelled at. So kind of like a right time, right place situation, right? And he became really gifted at this, so much so that after school, he got a job at that Timex plant as an apprentice. So while he was there, they mentioned that his dream was always to make games, right? He always liked the idea of being a game developer for these because he saw that there was kind of a growing scene of people making these games and trading them over the internet or even just by mail, right? In magazines. It wasn't even the internet at this time. It was just magazines in the mail.
Yeah.
So
maybe BBS is over phone lines, maybe.
Yeah, but that's a big maybe, right? This is even pre shareware probably, right? Or I guess pre shareware in the way I think of it, on a university network where you're things. Like it's
Those
pre that.
BBSs would evolve into that. There's probably, I mean, I guess it is shareware in the sense of like you could download programs here from those things, but I don't know if you'd call it. It's not quite the same thing as shareware.
It's probably we're probably still in the era of like you go look at a magazine and they have the code in there for you to type in to make
Yeah,
it yourself. Like that's
yeah,
kind of where we're at. So while he was at his job at the Timex plant, they essentially laid a bunch of people off and they gave him a severance of £3,000, which he used to spend on an Amiga 1000 start designing games. He spent his £3,000 on this computer, right?
nice.
Now, Kushner makes a point in here that's really funny to me. And it's like, when there's like the stories where like everyone's like, we believe in you and you could do this. No one believed in Dave Jones, apparently.
Oh,
Like they talk about how like his teachers, his university professors, his family all thought this was a stupid idea and that no one thought he would be able to sell games, right? However, he made his first game was called Menace and it was a success because Jones took a different outlook to game dev. Instead of it being like a sci-fi or a fantasy, kind of like we talked about with like the multi-user dungeons, you
hmm
know, like now what they're doing instead is he decided to make fast-paced arcade games in his computer. Like that's what he was kind of shooting for. And that's what Menace was. And it sold 15,000 copies, which is pretty
that's
good
pretty
for
good. You make
one
a buck
person.
off of those, off each one of those. I don't
Hmm.
know, man. You think you're doing okay?
Yeah, you're doing pretty good. So Jones then started off of the success of Menace DMA design. Now, DMA stands for direct memory access. It's a computer term. That's just what he named his company afterward. He hired friends from his amateur computer club that he was in town, and they started working on a game. And they were working on stuff, and then one of the programmers found that they could animate up to 100 little characters on a screen at once. And what they did is they made those characters die in horrific ways, kind of as like a joke, right? Like they'd fall into lava or whatever. And this is where the game Lemmings comes from.
Oh, I love
So
lemmings.
yeah, they made Lemmings. They designed the game. They sold 50,000 copies on its first day when it released on Valentine's Day 1991. And they would go on to sell 2 million copies worldwide. So, this is what put DMA design and more importantly, Dave Jones on the map, right? So, they even had like success where they would have Shigeru Miyamoto came to their studio. Like Jones essentially became a rock star in game development overnight
Ah,
because of the success of Ribbons. Hey, you like it? Like what I
yeah,
did there?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
mine.
yeah.
So Jones even got a multi-million-dollar contract, actually multi-million pound contract, right? Because we're in the UK here,
Mm-hmm.
to work with Nintendo to develop two games on the N64. There's a quote, I don't think I actually put it in my notes here, but Howard Lincoln described Jones as like a Spielberg-like figure in
Oh,
video games. It's a pretty big compliment,
so yeah, so
right?
he's like this guy's. He's got it. This is
Yeah,
the guy.
this guy's
Yeah.
going places, is what they thought. So things were looking up. They moved into a 2,500 square foot. Uh, Actually, maybe I got that wrong. Maybe it's 250,000 square foot office, a big office, and they hooked up their rooms with 250,000 pounds worth of technology.
Sheesh.
That's British pounds. That's the currency. They actually had these giant silicone graphics computers. That were the size of refrigerators, and Kushner makes a joke about how the Ministry of Defense was like, "Why are you buying all these computers? Like, what are you doing with these?"
Dang.
That's kind of cool. But their next adventure was going to be creating a virtual world. Like this is something that Jones always wanted to do. He wanted to program something that was like a virtual world that you felt like you were living in, right? And so they had one programmer made this like top-down cityscape, and this other programmer made it so you could run dinosaurs across, like dinosaurs would run through the city, right, and rampage through the city. But then another programmer realized that Jones loves cars, so they took the dinosaurs and replaced them with cars, and they made it a driving simulation. And that's when things really started popping off because now we have a city with a top-down view, and you're driving a car. So this is starting to sound familiar to
Yeah.
anyone.
Yep.
So Jones made the concept of the game Cops and Robbers, just like the childhood games he would play with friends, but they changed it to Race and Chase since Cops and Robbers was just too generic.
Also, raise and
They
chase rhymes. That's nice.
It is nice. It does feel racing, right? But they pitched the game to BMG Interactive. So now we see the
Ooh.
stories kind of intersecting here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jones got a deal to deliver 4 games over the next 13 months for Sony, Sega, and Nintendo. He would get 3.4 million pounds and retain all the rights to the games. That's the deal he got.
Seems like
And
a good
Sam
deal.
Hauser was the one that made the deal with him. And the chapter ends with a pretty drastic turn, though. It says, the game kind of sucked. And that's where the chapter
Dang. But they saw something in it because they gave him a bunch of money.
Yeah, they do. So chapter 4, we're just going to get right into it. So chapter 4 is on the at the point where the Sony PlayStation is in full swing. We are in development of Race and Chase. Sam Hauser was kind of seeing where it was, like the world was at the time, and it's going to be that these games are taking like an edgier turn, a more adult turn, right? Like the PlayStation is cool and hip. It's
Mm-hmm.
not for kids, right?
It's what your older brother
So
played.
exactly. So Hauser also hired an intern named Jamie King, who kind of shared his same work ethic and sensibilities, and they worked on Race and Chase together. Now, Race and Chase at the time felt a lot more like a driving sim, and as it turns out, while it's cool to simulate driving and stopping at traffic lights, it's kind of boring after a while because
Yeah.
now you're just driving, that's all you're doing. You couldn't really drive fast because you had to follow the rules of the road. You couldn't hit pedestrians because you would get like in trouble as a police officer. Because at the time you're playing a police officer, right? So what the folks at DMA did is they had an idea where what if they reversed it? So make it so the player is now a robber, like it's not instead of cops and robbers, it's robbers and cops,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't get in trouble for breaking traffic laws anymore because you're a criminal. And in fact, it's encouraged and you get points for running people over, right? Like that's what the object of the game is. So that's what they did. They made a new version and sent it over to BMG. BMG got the game and quickly realized things had changed when they started the new version out by playing a little player, like a little person, and you walk up to a car and you open the door and pull the person out and throw them on the ground and get in their car and drive away. Very Grand Theft Auto style now, but this is like very new at the time, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we get the beginnings of the Grand Theft Auto, essentially, is this Race and Chase. Now, Kushner goes into some detail about how Race and Chase's team at DMA were kind of the bad boys of the
Mm.
dev studio. They would have like Nerf gun fights and play music really loud, and they would like pull pranks on each other by putting rotten food in their desks. But I just think it's funny to see the dichotomy here of like these are the bad boy studio people, while everyone else is just working on lemmings and things that make them money. Just
Yeah. I'm
like
like, what
lemmings.
else did DMA make at the time? Because they made, I want to say they made like Body Harvest for.
Yeah, they did, and they also made a lot of Lemmings sequels and ports too.
Okay.
So, like, they mentioned that they would be working on Lemmings, like the other studio, like divisions seem to be
Yeah.
working
Okay.
on
They
that.
did Body Harvest on the 64 and Space Station Silicon Valley. So these were the
Ooh,
other kinds of games that were being made. Because when you say like, oh, the Race and Chase guys were the bad boys, I'm like, well, what were the good boys working on?
making Nintendo games
Yeah, Body Harvest
for
and Space Station
a,
Silicon
a
Valley.
still a still kid friendly Nintendo,
Mm-hmm.
probably, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So they even had a full band in the Race and Chase studio area to like play like the soundtrack, and they just had them rock out
That's
the whole
awesome.
time. They're so cool, right? Yeah. So the change of making a player a criminal had actually opened up the world to a lot of new ideas. However, one thing they found was that the players didn't really want to play the missions the designers had made. Like they would have these play tests and people just wanted to drive around. Because at the time to start a mission, you would walk up to a specific payphone and the mission would start. But in testing, the players would just ignore the payphones and drive around instead.
Sounds
And
awesome.
the yeah, I know. So the developers got around this by making it so any payphone in the city started the next mission. So that way, if a player wanted to just go drive around, they could do that. And then whenever they see a payphone, they feel like doing it, they could do the next mission, which I
Smart.
thought was a really creative way to do it. It's kind of like a way to make it more open world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Nonlinear storytelling a little bit. So Jones also wanted to focus the game on a market that would get people interested. So they chose the United States. The three cities that you can play as in the first Race and Chase game were New York, Miami, and San Diego, and they were changed to Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas, respectively. Sound familiar? So
Mm-hmm.
Hauser came into the fold with his own ideas too. So he's like, why not make it so the player can change the radio station to whatever they want? or if they get in a stolen vehicle, it has the radio station the person that was in there was listening to. So like you steal a giant big rig truck and they're listening to country music or something, right? Like
Because
this
all
was his
big rig
idea.
truckers love
Love
country
country
music,
music.
as we know.
Everyone knows. Yeah, right. So this free to play nature was good, and by free to play I mean like freedom to play around the world, not what we think of now as free to play. Was good for some, but not always great for others. Like Jones even questioned if what they were making was a game, like because there wasn't really an object to it if you're just driving around everywhere. However, that's kind of the beauty of this. Like they even mentioned that there was a programmer, Kushner highlights this, that would still play the game and like to stop at the stoplights and drive legally.
We've all been like known that person who plays Grand Theft Auto and like obeys all traffic laws and like just has a good time doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, it's silly. But this is also where the wanted system came in, where you would drive around if you commit enough crimes, you would get a police like APB out for your arrest, and then you would like have to avoid the police and you'd get busted and you'd lose all your weapons if you got caught. This is also where the respray, the spray and pray stations came in, where you would respray your car and then
Oh, you could
you
drop wanted levels, but yeah.
you lose your wanted levels. So there was a lot of high hopes here because they're making a game and everything feels really new. And so Sam is excited, Jones is excited, and they needed a new name. So they changed the name from Race and Chase to Grand Theft Auto. And this is where we're going to stop today
All
in
right.
the end of chapter 4. But Tyler, what you been playing?
I been playing. Well, I finished the Greek saga of God of War. So I finished God of War Ascension finally. So now I have moved on to God of War 2018, and I gotta say, the graphics are great. The storyline seems pretty good. The gameplay, I knew the gameplay was different from the other games, but it's so different that it's like it's kind of turning me off a little bit of the game. It feels a little bit uh like a victim of the Dark Soulsification of all games, where it's
Mm,
not nearly as I'm not trying to say that it is a Souls like experience because it really isn't, but it's like every fight is hard. The trash mobs can kill you if you're not careful. And I'm playing on like normal difficulty. I'm sure it gets, I could put it on an easier difficulty or whatever, but I'm just like, I am seeing that now of this, like, okay, I got to like block and parry and like be very deliberate with how I do stuff, which was sort of important in the original game, but you could kind of just button mash a bit more in the older games. And this one, I feel like I'm like, oh, the game has been Dark Soulsified, and it's got a little bit of a turn off for me because you know how much I love Dark Souls, which is to
he
say, not
loves
at
it.
all.
He loves
Um,
it, everybody. He's lying to you.
but the story seems good, and I do want to get into it. But I have not been able to do that. I've been working on a few other projects, and work has been kind of nuts this week too, past couple of weeks. So I haven't had
Yeah.
a ton of time to play video games. But what about you? What you been playing?
Ooh, well, I was playing some Metal Gear Solid 5. That
Yeah.
was fun. I can't do it again. But then Schedule 1 came out,
Mm.
and I'm pretty obsessed with Schedule 1. It's pretty silly. It's got what I can only describe as Rick and Morty graphics. So describe it. And it's just like a silly businessy sim about dealing drugs, but it's just so ridiculous that it kind of feels like endearing. It's a great game to play when you have like a YouTube video on or a podcast on or with friends because you
hmm
can play it with friends. And like, so for example, I played it with some friends of ours and they played and then we all watched a video together in Discord, but we were like on the game at the same time. And I just like kind of leave my character somewhere and just like, it's a good chill game. So
hmm
that's kind of what I've been into. Been playing that. I've been reading more comics lately. I haven't really played a lot of games other than that this week, though. It's been kind of slow the last couple weeks because we had some time off. But yeah, it was it's I'm getting back into it again. There's a lot of games. They just released the Baldur's Gate 3 final patch, and I kind
Oh,
of
there's
want
a
to play that
bunch of new
again.
stuff, huh?
Yeah, there's just so many games. And then South of Midnight came out. I haven't even touched it yet. And then we got Doom the Dark Ages coming out soon.
And this week is Claire Obscure Expedition 33, probably the
Yeah.
game I'm most excited for this year. Comes out on my
And then
birthday, so I'm taking a long
oh,
weekend.
snap. And also on top of that, they officially I like well, they leaked the Oblivion remake is coming out this
Oh
week too.
yeah.
They were gonna shadow drop it and then it got leaked. So But yeah, so there's a lot of games to play, a lot of things going on. It's
Mm-hmm.
exciting. But yeah, that's what I've been kind of doing this week. So with that, things you can do to support us. If you want to just tell your friends about us, that's really nice and helpful. We love that. You can leave us a positive review, like on wherever you listen to us, or like even just follow us on YouTube or something. That's neat too. If you want to send us an email, you can do that at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Codexpodcast.net has all of our links, including our Discords, Trello boards, piles of shames. Oh, I've also been playing Repo. Forgot to tell you
Oh, tell
that
me
too.
about that. What is repo? Because I keep hearing about it.
So Repo is about, it's kind of like Lethal Company, where
Okay.
you're like a little robot and you go to these like sci-fi places and you got to essentially repossess items for money from these haunted areas, right? And so there you got to sneak around and grab the item. If you run the item into a wall, it can like lose value, so you got to be careful about how you pick it up, and you have this like gravity gun-esque style hand that you pick it up with, and all the while you're avoiding monsters and scary things popping out at you. It's really silly. I never heard of the term like stream, a game that's like stream bait, which is what this is. Like it's like very much someone was like, I'm gonna take Lethal Company and make it even more streamer friendly to watch, right? It feels like that, but it's not a bad thing. Like I'm having a good time playing with my friends. I'm
Yeah,
not
good.
streaming it. I'm just playing the game. So
Yeah.
it's pretty fun. Repo is pretty cool. It's also I think only $10. So it's like you can't really go wrong there when it's like $10. Like ever since the tariff things have been announced, with like the cost of like Switch games being like $80, or the rumor mill that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be like $100, I think indies are going to be popping off here. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
What?
And so I've kind of been just playing those. Like that's what I'm into. Or Game Pass is going to be even more valuable, realistically.
Yeah, maybe if assuming they can get the good stuff on there.
Yeah, but anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. Check out Repo if you get a chance. Check out uh other episodes. I don't know. Listen to
Yeah,
us. We
buy
have
this
fun.
book, Jack, The Outlaw Story of Grand Theft
Oh,
Auto. It's a great book.
yeah,
Masters
yeah,
of
it's a
Doom
good.
too. Buy that one.
Buy that one too.
We don't have a
Also,
referral code. Maybe we should, but we don't get
if
anything.
you
Just do it.
we don't get anything from that, yeah. But if you can think of anyone else Tyler should fight, you should let us know also. And with that, Tyler, do you want to say goodbye to anybody?
Yeah.
Everybody? Anybody? Everybody.
Goodbye, anybody and everybody.